Well, this is an interview with Dr. Joel W. Wyman, who served as president of the State Medical Association during 1968 and 1969. The interview is being conducted by Dr. Laurie Brown and Ms. Monya Green. And we're in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Holiday Inn, where Dr. Wyman was very kind to come down to Charleston, especially for this interview. And Dr. Wyman, I'm going to ask you several questions. Today is November 16th, 1992. And I'll ask you a few questions. I want you to just talk about anything that you want to talk about and sort of follow up for the questions. Dr. Wyman, the first thing I'm going to ask is a little bit about your early life, about who your parents were and where you were born, a little bit about your family of origin if you can.
Well, I was born in Estill, South Carolina on the 16th of January 1911. My father was a country doctor. His name was Dr. Edward Hallbrook Wyman. He practiced medicine in Estill for 45 years, mainly for chickens, potatoes, and turnip greens, a ham shoulder occasionally. Wasn't very much money in it. My mother was Annie W. Wyman. She was from Hepzibah, Georgia, and she was a school teacher who came to that area to teach school. I might mention at this time that the first Wyman, and there have been a lot of Wyman doctors in the state of South Carolina. At one time I read there had been 26. I think there have been a few more since that time, and various forms of medicine. They were principally around Aiken, South Carolina, but elsewhere in the state, the lower part of the state as usual. The first Dr. Wyman came from Massachusetts. At that time he was a school teacher and taught in Boiling Springs in Barnwell, South Carolina. The medical college at that time was in Charleston, and I do not remember the name of it. But he decided that he didn't want to teach school anymore. He was a country schoolmaster. He wanted to go to medical school. So he came to Charleston and graduated from the medical college here in 1831. He was a Latin scholar, so he wrote his thesis in Latin. And for that, he received a silver cup, which was made by a very famous silversmith in Charleston. And that cup now resides in the Waring Historical Library on the campus of the Medical University, and I'm very proud of that. I think that more or less answers that question. Yes, now we can go to another one if you like at this time.
That sounds good. Now you grew up in Estill, did you?
Yes, I did.
And where did you go to college? You want to tell me about going to college and how you sort of decided to become a doctor?
I went to the University of South Carolina as a 17-year-old boy in 1928. And you know, during that time, Southern people were in a big depression. And there was very little money for anybody to go to school, and people were working to go to school and delivering newspapers and anything they could to get the money to go to school. And I happened to have to be one of those because my father by that time was somewhat elderly and unable to produce much income in his practice. During this time, I had a brother who was a doctor in Columbia, and he was of some help to me. I have always been influenced, I think, by the fact that there were so many doctors in my family. And doctors in those days were held in high measure. They were influential in the community, and they were leaders in the community. And I wish to emulate that. And I hope I have. Only time will tell.
I think you have.
We will go ahead if you like.
All right. Now, you went to undergraduate school where?
The University of South Carolina.
All right. Now, what about medical school? Tell me about your medical school and how you got in, and who were some of the professors that might have influenced you a little bit
Well,
during your training in medical school?
because of the fact that I was unable to go to school on a regular basis and having to work and sustain myself, I was a little late. I was about 5 years older than the average member of my class. But I entered the Medical University of South Carolina. It was not named that at that time, in 1943. I had my difficulties the first 2 years, as did everyone else. And, but anyway, we made it. I'm very thankful to many people who helped me along the way. But I must speak about somebody whom I think was one of the finest teachers and finest individuals I have ever known in my life, and that's Dr. Kenneth Lynch, who was professor of pathology and an international known medical figure. I will always honor him in my memory. There were others who were very fine, Dr. Frank Johnson for one, and others from the community of Charleston who came in and gave their time, and I thank them all. I won't call their names because it would go into 2 minutes.
Right. Now, was Dr. Lynch also dean at that time?
Yes, he was.
And being dean was the same as the president's office today?
That is correct. He was more or less responsible for the school as it was at that time. And he did a great deal for the medical university, for those of us at that time know about, to help it get where it is today.
Yes, sir. And he was admissions committee at that time too.
That is exactly right, and he interviewed me.
Yep.
And when the interview was over, I told him how I had had to work and go to school and how I wanted to study medicine, and I wasn't the most scholarly student in the world, but after the interview, he said, "We're going to take you." I was very thankful for that. I didn't know whether I could get in or not.
Then what did you do after medical school then? Did you have an internship or residency or?
Yes.
What?
Yes. Again, I had gathered up a wife and a child in the late years. I gathered up a wife first and then a child later during my internship. And again, I had no money, but they offered a stipend of $75 at McLeod Infirmary in Florence. And I took that because I needed the $75. And I was also offered a chance to help in the clinics on part-time in Florence County. They needed a little help. I had helped in clinics prior to that in Columbia. So that gave me a little extra income in order to support my wife and child. I was in Florence until May of 1944, when the United States Army sent me an invitation to join at no uncertain terms.
And you did.
And I did. Now, during this time in the Army, and I spent about slightly over 1 year in Europe. And I might say this as we go along. I was a general medical officer, but I had gained some experience in the clinics, of charity clinics I had worked in Colombia, in diseases of the skin. So that knowledge was very limited in general in the Army, and particularly in Europe. So the Army made a D dermatologist out of them. That's about the lowest classification you could get, A being the highest. So I spent a good bit of my time, certainly after the war was over, traveling over Europe as a consultant in diseases of the skin with no special training. But I became interested in diseases of the skin at that time. That's the point I wanted to bring out. And later we'll discuss that if you like.
Well, that's interesting.
I went after, well, if you want to go ahead and ask
Yes,
questions, I'll tell you.
You just go right ahead. After
I got out of the Army, I was still financially embarrassed with 2 mouths to feed, 3 mouths to feed actually, with myself. And I looked around over the state, and I found out that if you went to Anderson, I was told this, that you could make a living rather quickly because all the old doctors were tired, and they'd be glad for somebody to do their night work. And certainly I needed the money, so I was glad to do their night work for them. So I did general practice in Anderson for slightly more than 3 years, and got some of my debts paid off and so forth, and accumulated a small amount of money, working almost 24 hours a day, very little sleep. But I made it anyway. Realizing that I could not continue this, really, in the way I was going, I decided that since I had this certain knowledge of skin diseases, that I needed to really get some more training in that. So I went, applied to Harvard University, and they accepted me and placed me at Boston City Hospital for 1 year. Then they took me in for the 2nd year at Massachusetts General Hospital. I had a child who developed the rheumatic heart disease up there, and I was told that I needed to get him out of that cold, damp environment. So I talked to Dr. Calloway at Duke, and he agreed to accept me for my final year of training at Duke University. So I was there, and during that time I did some bit of teaching, saw a lot of charity patients, and generally enjoyed the atmosphere at Duke University and prepared myself for my boards, which I got in 1952. The doctors in Anderson were very good. Several people tried to move into Anderson, but I told them I was coming back. These were not board qualified people. These were people that just called themselves dermatologists. So I went back to Anderson and formed the dermatology clinic. Now, I have digressed a good bit since your last question. If you would like to move on to another question,
good,
please do so.
You've been at Anderson for quite a while.
Quite
You
a
practiced,
while.
didn't you?
I went back in '52, and till 2 years ago, I was in practice. Yeah, in Anderson. A clinic grew rather huge, and I had to take in 3 additional partners. We were told that we had the largest practice in the Southeast. We had 4 dermatologists. Eventually, I got on taking some time away. I gradually stopped the practice of medicine, turned the business over to the younger men.
So in about 1990, you retired. That was a couple
Yes,
years
in
ago.
July, I saw my last patient in June of 1990. But by that time, I had cut my practice down to 1/2 a day every other week.
That's part-time
That's
practice.
really part-time practice.
Now, you said something about being married. You got married when you were in medical school?
Yes, in my junior year in January of 1942.
And your wife was named what?
My wife's name was Mildred Elizabeth Gwinner. That's spelled Gwinner. She was from Mark Twain's home, Hannibal, Missouri. And I had worked part-time for her father, trying to sell a little bit of insurance. They had moved to Columbia, South Carolina. That was part of the little bit of income I was trying to get to go to school. So I met her through her father. And later, much longer later, we were married and had 2 boys. The oldest boy now will be 50 next year, and the youngest will be 45. And one was pre-war and one post-war. I was gone a while. So I think that covers a part of the family.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Now, would you like to go ahead with some other questions, or would you like to say something? Go ahead.
I think that I might ask you how satisfying your medical career was, and if there were any really memorable events that stand out. And in such a long career, it's awfully difficult to assess things like that, I'm sure.
But my mother, I may go back, wanted me to be a Presbyterian preacher, you see. Well, I didn't feel that I could quite fit that well enough. My father advised me not to study medicine because there wasn't any money in medicine from his experience. But I've always liked people. I always had the desire to give service in some way. I think that's the most fulfilling thing in life. You can have millions of dollars and yet be the most unhappy person in the world. And I have seen some of those people in my practice. And I never envied them a dime of their money, because they were not truly happy people. Giving service inflates one's ego. And I give service to everybody, whether they had 5 cents or not. I never turned a patient down, to my knowledge. So I had to make a living, and I did. But I gave the service that the public needed, regardless of their ability to pay. And that's about finishes what I can say on that.
Well, that is one long, memorable event.
That's right.
Now, do you remember how you sort of became involved in organized medicine? And I use that organized medicine sort of in quotes, but in medical societies that aspect of medicine?
I told one of the older doctors in Columbia, and I don't remember who he was, but he was active in the South Carolina Medical Association, that I was going to Anderson. And he said to me, he said, well, if that's where you're going, please try to do something to get those people interested in organized medicine. And I always remembered that. So, of course, I became a member of the Anderson County Medical Society and became quite an active member. And every year I took my turn giving a talk before the Anderson County Medical Society. I was also active on the staff of the Anderson Hospital. I also gave a talk there every year. I remember one time that they had Dr. Lynch up to speak at a meeting. And I was the doctor selected at that time, before I knew Dr. Lynch was coming, to give a 10-minute discussion. Well, I just nearly froze when I learned that Dr. Lynch was going to be there, you see. And I had the dream the night before that he had come up to Columbia and come up to Anderson and taken my license back. See, a horrifying dream. But anyway, I stumbled through that 10-minute talk that I had, and I enjoyed Dr. Lynch's talk a great deal. He talked about the medical college at that point.
I might say that that dream was a real nightmare.
Real nightmare. Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Now, what were...
Okay, I
some of the...
digressed so much that I didn't get into this. Anyway, I was finally elected president of the Anderson County Medical Society and a delegate to the South Carolina Medical Association. That begins my activity in organized medicine to a degree. And later, I was elected alternate delegate to the American Medical Association by the South Carolina Medical Association, and on one occasion served as delegate there when the delegate couldn't go. All right. Now, during the latter part of this time, and I might proceed, the American Medical Association developed AMPAC, which was the American Political Action Committee. And all 48 or 50 states developed PACs of their own. And I must take my hat off to you, because you were one of the people that helped to start that PAC organization in this state. And ultimately, I became head of the PAC effort in this state. And the effort was made so that we could elect delegate representatives from this state who were friendly to organized medicine. This succeeded partially. We had a great deal of difficulties getting doctors to join this thing. I think about 1 out of 9 doctors joined it. For various reasons, they didn't do it, and I still don't know why, because the effort was trying to protect their practice and protect the people of South Carolina from bad medicine, which is socialized medicine is bad medicine for everybody. It's assembly line medicine, and that's no good. The best friend any individual can have is a good, loving, well-trained family practice physician, and that's what we were fighting the battle for.
And that was a struggle, wasn't it?
That was a struggle, as you know, Laurie, because you were in the struggle yourself. Now, that's about all I need to say about that, I think. Now, if you would like to ask me something else, I was involved in that way in medicine, trying to prevent the socialization of medicine. That was because of my friends like you. I was leading the effort for 2 years.
And then, soon after that, you got elected to the presidency of
Yes.
the state association.
That is correct. In 1967, because as you know, the president serves 1 year as kind of an unstudy to the president, and as a member of the council, which is the ruling body of the South Carolina Medical Association, as authorized by the House of Delegates. I think I was elected because I had a lot of friends. I had made a lot of noise with this sock pack movement, and it chaired a number of banquets, which the sock pack people.
Right.
So I was recognized by the membership at large and by them. And Anderson Medical Society put my name up. And I was elected. That's it. And served from 68 to 69. All right. Now, if you would like to continue with your question, then I'll go ahead. And
Well, now, what were some of the major issues during your presidency? The medicine, socialized medicine deal, and was there anything else?
well, we were inundated with Medicare and Medicaid and other programs which the Appalachian Health Program. All these programs were given federal money to the state and to these programs. And there was one other one which was a national regional program, which Lyndon Johnson established to put money up for various and sundry types of programs. We were not adequately represented. We had a secretary, executive secretary, who was a very fine man, who lived in Florence. And he did, as far as he could, on a part-time basis, an excellent job. But it did not adequately cover the whole, and it was necessary for the president to attend all of these meetings and take part in all of these meetings and try to stop some of the well-meaning people who were hospital administrators and in-house doctors from advancing programs that were detrimental to the private practice of medicine. They more or less wanted to establish clinics within their own hospitals. That's fine for charity people, but they were going to take in everybody, and some of them, you know, even the millionaire could come and get free medical treatment if they could get the money through one of these programs. That I objected to very strenuously, and that got some rather uncomplimentary remarks made in my direction because of that. but we were able to stave off one or two of them anyway. And so that regional medical program had to have 51% of the membership from the general public. Not all of the doctors who were members were in attendance, and we had to vote on all of these things. So sometimes we lost, and sometimes we made it. You know, we won. And I was not held in very high regard by some administrators in the state because of my efforts to stop what they wanted. Because I did not think it was in the best interest of the patient, and certainly not in the best interest of the doctor. Now, would you like to, of course, Medicare and Medicaid were coming in, and nobody knew much about what they were doing, including the doctors. And doctors were unhappy about that, and I got a good bit of mail from individual doctors relative to some of that. And then we still had the osteopathic problem, which the man who preceded me fought rather hard, Dr. Norman Eady from Sumter, and the problem was still there when I became president, see, so it was up to me to fight. So we got some rather abusive treatment down at the legislature. There was a man up here from North Charleston who was head of the Medical Affairs Committee. He was a rather harsh individual, and he was pushing this osteopathic bill. So he and I exchanged some words too, along with a few others. And anyway, in the following year, Dr. William Perry's year, it was finally passed, and I don't know much about it or anything about it since that time.
Yes. Well, did you go to the legislature much during that time?
Yes,
yes,
we had to go down and testify and the various and sundry things. I don't remember all of them, but they were trying to form some type of medical, I'm a little vague on this, some type of committee to advise the government on, the state government on medical things in general. And they didn't have a doctor listed on the committee. So I went down there and made a talk for a full house in front of the legislature about why you had to have doctors on this committee. Again, running into this same guy from, I shouldn't say guy, gentleman, may I say, I'll correct myself, from North Charleston, who was chairman of the Medical Affairs Committee. Again, another rather abusive session.
Well, now, we didn't have anybody in Columbia, excuse me, we didn't have anybody in Columbia at that time who could go to the legislature
That is absolutely correct. We did not have anybody in Columbia watching over the affairs of the South Carolina Medical Association. In my address to the House of Delegates when I was ending my presidency, I told the House of Delegates that we had to have better organization. And in order to do so, we had to have a raise in dues, that we needed a permanent presence in Columbia to protect the interests of the medical society and to try to keep these people from passing some bad legislation which not only adversely affected the medical community, but it would adversely affect the individual who was seeking medical care. Fortunately, that bill never passed, so that committee was never appointed. And again, I ran into this fellow from North Charleston. I don't even remember his name. Seems to me he had been mayor up there at one time. If I'm not answering your questions adequately, I'm sorry, but this is about all I know about it. Now, if you want to go further with this next question, number 9, I would like to say something about that.
All right, so you just go right ahead and say anything that you want to about.
And the question asked,
during your presidency.
what do you consider your major accomplishment to have been? Well, I don't know that the president himself ever accomplishes anything much individually, except he represents the society. Council is the overseeing body of the South Carolina Medical Association, and all policy is created by the House of Delegates, and council carries it out. The founding fathers of the South Carolina Medical Association did a fine thing when they set up the House of Delegates as it did, from representatives from each medical society over the state. And then a council, doctors represented each congressional district to implement the orders of the House of Delegates. The president is a member of not only the House of Delegates, but of the council. And all policy then ultimately comes from the House of Delegates through the council. So I can't say that I did anything in that area. That came to me through the proper channel.
Yes.
And I tried to carry out what I was told to do with no authority, you see.
That's a good explanation, I think, of the workings of the association.
That's right, that's right, it was. Now,
would you have done anything differently, just looking back on things during the year as president?
I don't know what I could have done differently because of the organization. I was following orders, really. I was a figurehead. You understand me?
Yes, sir.
It's been 24 years, so my memory is not quite as acute as it used to be. Now, I would like to say one, if you have some more questions, I have 2 things I would like to say.
You go right ahead, sir.
I've always been been interested in the history of medicine. I guess because of my great-grandfather's experience. And Dr. Joseph I. Waring was curator of the library. It was formerly named the Hoffman, I believe, Library. And it was part of the school that the medical college took over, a somewhat Porter Academy it was. Dr. Waring went there and was struggling to get the thing properly organized to have a historical library. And he was not only giving of his time, but he was giving of his money in order to accomplish this. Joe Waring is one of the finest gentlemen I ever knew in my life. So I was determined to help him in some way. And I wrote a letter and was published in the journal. It was the president's letter asking the membership to help him. But I don't know how well they did. But I personally contributed rather substantially to this and formed what was called the Wyman Fund. And I wrote letters to all members of my family asking them to contribute to this fund. And a good many of them did. How much, I do not know. And that name was maintained, the Wyman Fund, for some time. And finally, I think the funds there were incorporated in the general fund of the library. I did this too because, as I mentioned earlier, my great-grandfather's cup was finally accepted there. And I might repeat myself, but he won this cup by writing the best thesis in Latin in his class.
I haven't read that.
Yeah.
I haven't read that thesis.
I haven't either. I don't read Latin. Anyway, I think, Dr. Brown, that about covers all I have to say except one other thing. In 1973, I got a letter from Dr. William McCord. Did I? May I regress a bit that we...
Certainly.
I'm not sure that I covered this.
You were right ahead.
When I was president, Dr. McCord asked me to be a member or head a committee to name that library that we've just been talking about, the Hoffman Library
Yes.
at Porter Military Academy. And he had appointed 2 professors from the medical university. So we decided to recommend to the Board of Trustees they name it the Waring Historical Library. And that was so done, and that's what it's named today. And my hat's off to Joe Waring as a fine historian and a fine gentleman. He's long gone, but we still remember him.
Yes, sir.
For what he was. Now I would like to I did, along with other doctors, and he wanted to talk about a fundraising campaign, told us about the need for funds for the medical university. The appropriation that he got from the state was just not meeting all the needs of the medical university. And we all agreed, and all agreed to help. And right out of the blue, he asked me to chair that national program to raise those funds. Well, to make a long story short, I met Dr. McCord at various medical societies over the state, mostly over the upper part of the state, try to help him raise those funds.
Dr. Wyman, what are some of the major issues you see facing medicine today?
Well, until this last election, I had some hopes that we were going to survive socialized medicine, but I frankly think that it's moving in rather rapidly.
About the election and what? Okay.
Well, I said earlier that I had some hopes that we could avoid the complete socialization of medicine till this last election. But I think now, and I regret it, because as I said earlier, I think socialized medicine is the worst medicine in the world for the patient. But I believe now, and I hope I'm wrong, that under this new regime, we're going to see the rapid socialization of the medical profession. And unless we can be successfully develop the state PAC, I'll go back to my theme, the state PAC organizations for political activity and the national organization of MPAC, we really are going to have socialized medicine. The Canadian system apparently is partially effective, but many of those people under their national program are coming to the United States to get good medical care. So that does not speak very well for the system.
Not too well.
No. No.
Well, you still got to be optimistic, haven't you?
Yes, I hope I'm optimistic. I hope that it doesn't come, but I'm uneasy about it. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have any hobbies or anything particularly you like to do now? Since you retired?
Yeah. Well, I'm married for the second time to a girl whom I courted in college. My first wife died. She was a very lovely person. And I'm enjoying my second wife a great deal. She's a very fine, lovely person. And she puts up with me, and that's a whole lot. See?
That's a lot, isn't it?
I like to do things that, for physical reasons, I can't do much of anymore, like golfing and like hunting. But I do fish. I do fish, and I have a few other outdoor activities, but they are mostly work, like getting up leaves out of my yard. So that's about it. I can no longer drive at night, so I cannot attend medical meetings. I don't see well to drive at night, so I do not attend medical meetings. However, I read about it. I read the Journal of the South Carolina Medical Association regularly, and I keep up with it, and so I enjoy that. And we have an editor now who is certainly a brilliant young man.
Oh, that's been great.
Yeah, Charlie Brown.
Yes.
And so I like reading his editorials and keeping up with medicine in that way, and that's about all I can do.
Well, I got to ask you one question about your hobby. Do you ever catch a fish?
Very few. Very few. But I have a pontoon boat. I have a place on Lake Hartwell, and I have a pontoon boat, which I keep parked outside on the lake right near my house. So it's quite easy to go down there and get on board with my fishing rod and a comfortable chair and a friend. I don't ever go by myself, too old. And we go out and try to catch a fish. But even if we don't, we have a lot of conversation. And it's a rather big lake and a beautiful lake, and we just enjoy being out there. Sometimes we see wildlife on the shores and that sort of thing, and we talk about this and sundry things. He is a person who is a very conservative person, and retired man, and he like me, does not like liberalism. So we get along real well together. See, sometimes he outfishes me most of the time, but I don't hold it against him.
All
see?
right, all right. Well, Dr. Wyman, I think this concludes our interview here, and I want to thank you very much for coming to Charleston to begin with, because we will come to you sooner or later.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure talking to you, and on behalf of Ms. Green and me and the Medical Association and Dr. Brown, who is putting these archives together for the state, I want to thank you.
And I would like to thank you. I've known you for many years, Laura, and you always have been on the right side, and you always gave of your time and your intellect. And the South Carolina Medical Association is better for you because you took an interest and you were active. And on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for what you've done and the efforts that you've made and the time-consuming effort that you're making now to make this program work. Without you, it wouldn't work, Laura, and I give you 5.
Well, thank you very much. I've got to ask you one more question.
All right.
You look right up at that camera and tell me, would you do it all over again?
I was more vigorous in those days. I guess I would if I could be of some help. And I hope I was of some help when I served. But it hasn't always been easy. But yes, I would do it again.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.